Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 9 of the anime series Norn9, and talk about the plot just thickening every single episode now, every single step of the way. Is this story getting that much more intriguing, that much more captivating, adding that much more depth? And this episode was just be filled with revelations of plenty, and with each new successive revelation, I left with burgeoning new questions, and it's kind of funny because it follows on the coattails of my last episode discussion video, where one of the chief things I took away from this episode as being highly moving and just captivating was very much something I was kind of eschewing for the time being, because I didn't know how relevant to the story it was going to become. I had been given the heads up in the comments that much to my surprise, I had actually been mistaken in making the assumption that when we see the flashback of Nanami wiping someone's memory, in childhood, that kind of thing, I had made the assumption this was Akito, and it kind of, played to a sense of logic for me at the time, because he was very much scathing toward her, pointedly blaming her for having taken something from him, and I just assumed that he had been aware of maybe some memory loss while not being able to pinpoint what those memories were, that he was blaming her for having wiped his own memory, that kind of situation. And much as we find in this episode, I was actually very delighted that I hadn't delved into it myself and spoiled myself to make any conclusions or jump to any conclusions as to how that was all going to play out, because with the revelation in this episode that it is Senri whose memory was wiped, and that it is Akito who is his older brother, and it was him who asked Nanami to do this to begin with, blew my ever-loving mind. Now, I'm still a little unclear as to the fine details, because he's talking about Aion having found and, air quotes, saved him, and sort of guided him and all this kind of stuff, and I don't know how exactly that all works out. You have kind of like the Aion thing. Are they two sides of the same coin? What exactly is going on in there with I'm assuming they're the AI sort of center found deep down within Norn and everything like that. Not all that clear on it, what Aion is exactly or who he is, and everything like that. But whatever the case, it seems per Akito's description, the reason all of this even happened to begin with was because Senri has this water-based power that was much too much for his body to contain and would have killed him effectively had it not been for Akito taking half of his abilities out of him. Now, we have heard that Akito has had no powers, and I'm a little sketchy on whether or not he came to Norn without powers entirely beforehand, and he had only taken, some of Senri's powers and abilities after coming to Norn, or if he had taken this half of Senri's powers before coming to Norn. But whatever the case, his whole driving force is to free Senri. Arguably speciously, does he have it in mind that if he takes Senri's powers and he takes the memory of his being Senri's older brother from Senri's mind, through Nanami's help, he is freeing Senri from the responsibilities of having these powers that could be lethal to him, freeing him from the responsibility of, being someone with abilities, having to make that choice, whether or not to reset the world and reset history and all that kind of stuff. And, it's quite an intriguing counterbalance there going on, because on the one hand, Akito is doing something very honorable and sacrificial, but at the same time, you could almost see it as a punishment. And he's been very scathing toward Nanami, who he's using as his chief pinion in making this happen, like exploiting her abilities of being able to wipe Senri's memory in the first place. So it's all somewhat convoluted, but not in a negative sense. There's just so much going on, and there's so much depth to it. You could almost have, focused this entire story, this entire series, I feel, on Akito, Nanami, and Senri with this in mind. You have so many other characters and so many other things going on, and it's just like, damn, so many times are Akito and Nanami coming to the fore as just being very poignant to the overall plot. And as I'm led to understand the game and everything like that, depending on how you play it and choices you make or whatever, the focus of the story can change, this, that, and the other thing. So I'm sure this is a very Akito Nanami-centric, aspect to the story. But I feel like, at least for my money, at the moment, it is the most poignant. It's the one that takes the most sort of, of my attention as I'm watching the series. I want to know more about them. I want to know more about this history and, like, what led to all of this and everything like that. And it's just really, as I say, intriguing as all hell. Of course, coinciding with this, do we still have the ongoing search for Koharu on Kakaro's part? And we saw a little more at the beginning of the episode of what led to her using her abilities and Kakaro's father, his involvement and everything like that. And it seems very much almost like a Mr. Freeze, if you're familiar with the Batman Rogues Gallery kind of thing, where it's almost as though the impression I get is he's trying to bring about the reset because he's trying to recapture his lost love. Like, he lost somebody very near and dear to him. I don't know if this is a wife, a daughter, or what, because at one point he seems to think he sees this woman's reflection on his computer screen, and Koharu's just, happened to be walking in the room, and he goes and embraces her and calls her by a different name. And even she's left wondering, who this is to Kakaro's father, and is this his sole motivation? Is this what it's all about? Something very kind of selfish, but you can understand it because he lost someone he very deeply loved and was devoted to, and he has this sort of, again, specious idea. There's a lot of specious ideas going on about how to maybe recapture that by just, winding time back and creating time anew, history anew. And it's really intriguing because a lot of the dialogue, coinciding with that, of course, we have Mikoto still off with Natsuhiko, and he's very much against the reset, whereas Kakaro's father is very much for the reset. And, I mean, he's stockpiled weapons aplenty, what looks like a whole warehouse of nuclear weapons, all this kind of stuff. The guy's sick. What he's willing to do, like, he wants to destroy the world just to bring it back to zero and try to recapture his love and all this kind of stuff. But I find it interesting that in the dialogue, in the conversation between Natsuhiko and Mikoto, respectively, versus Kakaro's father and Koharu, it's almost a reverse of the point of view, in how they're bringing about discussing the topic of the reset. Natsuhiko's very much against it, and yet he's kind of trying to fuel Mikoto's own considerations by saying, who knows, maybe the reset is the better thing, the better choice to make. And this is really highly intriguing to me. Here we have characters who are very much open-minded and very much exhibiting the idea of considering all possibilities, considering, the ramifications of putting the reset through versus not putting it through. Even though Natsuhiko is very plain stated in his being against the reset, he is still considering, could it be the more beneficial choice? And he doesn't want someone like Mikoto, this, one of these people with abilities, one of these people who is going to be an integral role into making the decision whether to reset or not. He doesn't want to give her just his side of the story. He wants to give her the bigger picture. Of course, he is kind of trying to romance her with science and all this kind of stuff. And I ate that entire sequence up. Some weird cinematography there where they're like zooming around her head as they're looking up the stars and the moon. But the topic of discussion was speaking to my very own passions, the idea of science and progress and the exploration of space and the moon, and versus the creation and sort of perversion of science to create weapons and destruction and all these kinds of things. Something that, going all the way back to when I was in, like middle school, when I read H.G. Wells' The Time Machine for the first time, and I'd seen the subsequent George Pal film version, I highly recommend, as well as Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The Traveler in The Time Machine and Captain Nemo in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, these were men who were very passionate against the perversion of science and seeing war consuming the world. And I have to believe that the plotters of this series were probably given to being inspired along those lines. And that just, again, I just ate that stuff up. Like, it's speaking to my very own point of view, the idea of the betterment of mankind versus the destruction of mankind. Why is there such a predominance for creating machines of war when we could create machines to propel us to Mars and all these kinds of things, these much more wondrous and adventurous aspects? And that's very much what Natsuhiko's putting forth in his dialogue to Mikoto. And even, I have to give props where they are due. Even Kakeru's father is at least considering, what if the reset is a mistake? What if I'm not successful in what I want to do? In his talking to Koharu and trying to influence her one way or the other. But at least we have these very broad-ranged characters where it isn't just black and white. It isn't just, this is the way I want it, and you will do as you are told. Or, they're only going to put off their point of view as the right one. Like, they're actually very broad in how they're considering everything that's potentially going to happen in the wake of a reset scenario. And, for me, it's mind-blowing. All of that. It's absolutely, I keep going back to it, it's intriguing, it's captivating, it's mind-blowing to see the depth and the range and the open-mindedness of these characters. You may have characters who are set in their ways and who are potentially dangerous. Look at Ron dogging, Kakeru's every step in his trying to find Koharu and save her. And very much sort of taunting him, that idea of, well, you've lost her, you failed, and all that kind of stuff. And, mocking him about the little earpiece. And, we see his father having one. He's perplexed, believing his father to have been dead all this time. And here, his father is the very own traveler who was the earliest influence for Koharu and all that kind of stuff. Like how all of these intermixed relationships, they've been intertwined even before some of these characters have come together. And it's just like a groundswell of amazing pacing and plotting. Yes, there are still plot holes that need to be filled and need to be explained out a little bit, but if this episode is any sort of, significant show of the fact that they will, I wouldn't be surprised if we get toward the end of this all, the very in-depth ins and outs of what Ion is, what Norn is, what, is going to be integral to the decision-making process. And I find myself, calling back to the idea of Akito and Senri, I find myself suspecting Nanami didn't go through with completely wiping Senri's memory of Akito's now revelation of their relationship. I'm hoping very much that she didn't go through with it, and we will still have another confrontation potentially to come between Akito and Senri, where Senri may, finally own up to his life and own up to whatever courage he has inside, because he is a very timid, sort of soft-spoken character. I kind of hope he finds himself and confronts Akito like, what are you thinking, dude? You're my brother. We're in this together, that kind of thing. Like, I don't know. Just highly intriguing and captivating. And of course, for all intents and purposes, it seems like all the chess pieces are aligned. The, requirements for all of these characters with abilities to make and consider this decision. And I hope we're going to get a little more in depth, as I say, explanation of what that is going to entail. How will they make this decision? Who will be the guiding factor? I have to assume it's probably Ion, that kind of thing, the heart of Norn, whatever that is. And it's really going to be interesting to see what they feel is the best choice. Have they all been given as, broad a picture of consideration as Mikoto and Koharu? I almost have to assume they are going to be the deciding factors. I don't know, but it leaves me really intrigued and just captivated on the edge of my seat to see where this is going to go, and I can't wait to find out. And so yeah, just another amazing episode with lots of characterization and depth and intrigue and captivating aspects, to keep reiterating those words. superlatives aplenty. Just bring on the finale. I want to see how this all plays out. And a few episodes to go, and we shall see. So, otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.